to tell, and it'd be good to hear some more throughout the weekend, so watch out. I might suddenly pick on you and say, come and share your story. But what we'll do as well, at some point in the weekend, probably on Sunday morning, we'll have a time when we can share testimony from this weekend, from what God has been doing with you this weekend, okay? And I keep stressing this weekend, because it's not an opportunity for you to share your life story, alright? It's what's God done with you this weekend. So, over the next, like I say, 12 months, we're going to be busy with what were, all these exciting possibilities. Finland, Liberia, Barbados, peas down St. John. It doesn't get any better than that, any more exotic than that. And all these things that we can get excited about are good. And it's good to get excited, isn't it? But if we're not careful, we can get carried away with that. And this weekend, I think we really need to think about what this ministry is all about. How many of you come here this weekend thinking like, I'm going to have a great time? Anybody coming out? Yeah. I'm going to be so blessed by God. Anybody thought that? Yeah. I'm just really looking forward to getting whacked by the Holy Spirit. When you go through that prayer tunnel, it's going to be such a laugh, isn't it? And just that sense of, if we're not careful, it's a bit like chasing after a spiritual high, isn't it? Yeah. And there is nothing wrong with, us getting a spiritual high. There's nothing wrong with God blessing us and the Holy Spirit being poured out upon us, but that isn't an end in itself. And we need to remember what we're about. We need to remember what it says on these banners here. Aldersgate Renewal Ministries exist for the equipping of the local church to minister to the world in the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what we're about. When we come to a church like Rise Park, it's for the equipping of that church, the further equipping, the re-equipping, the new equipping, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. But it's about equipping that church to minister to the world in the power of the Holy Spirit. And that's what we've got to remember. We're not about getting a spiritual high. We are about equipping the church. We're a tool that God is using. And our job is to make ourselves more available to be used more and more. Why have we got to remember why this is important? This strap line? Well, I think it was Bill Hybels who said that the local church is the hope of the world. The local church is the hope of the world. How many of you belong to a little church? Quite a small church. Yeah. And how many of you sometimes struggle to see how that church could possibly be the hope of the world? Anybody in a big church struggle to see how the church could be the hope of the world? Because often our sense of what it means to be church is wrapped up in so much clutter, isn't it? There's this thing happening, there's that thing happening, there's this meeting going on, there's that meeting going on. Our worship looks like this, it doesn't look like that. If we don't have this thing going on, then that group of people will be offended. If we do have this thing going on, that other group of people will be offended, and we've not got enough money, and we've not got enough people, and the people we have got are all getting older, and the buildings are a problem, and We can go on and on, can't we? How on earth can that be the hope of the world? Well, it can't, basically. It can't. Because that's not the church. That's stuff that the church has fallen into. And so the church is you and me. The church is the people of God. And that is why the equipping of the Holy Spirit can make us the hope of the world. Because it is only in God's power, isn't it, that we can possibly be the hope of the world. I've been a Methodist all my life, nearly 30 years now, and all right, 40
Can I borrow your mirror?
Yeah. And throughout my lifetime, I've known the Methodist Church to be a church of activity, tremendous activity. You want some food? Go to your Methodist church. You want a cup of coffee? Not a good one, mind you, but you want a cup of coffee, go to your local Methodist church. You know, if you need a mother and toddler group, go to your local Methodist church. If you need a food bank, go to your local Methodist church. And so it goes on. We are a church of activity. For those of you who aren't Methodists, I'm sure the same applies to non-Methodists. And all that can be good, and it can be ministering to the world, but very little of it is in the power of the Holy Spirit. Very, very little. You see, you can run a mother and toddler group without the Holy Spirit. You can serve coffee without the Holy Spirit. Costa does it all the time. Their coffee's better than ours as well. You can even have Sunday services without the Holy Spirit. They're not very good, but you can have them. And for us to be the church, to be the hope of the world, we need this Holy Spirit. And you might think, well, it's a bit presumptuous, it's a bit big-headed to say the church is the hope of the world. I don't know, have you seen the world recently? There ain't much else about, is there? No. That is speaking hope. When we were in Hucknall, Mark and myself and a few others, we started doing healing on the streets, didn't we? And we spent a whole year stood on one spot. We went home in between that. It was a whole year. Every Saturday morning, we went and stood on the same spot in the town centre, and we prayed about this ministry that we felt that God was leading us to. And about the same sort of time as we started doing this, a shop opened up. I forget what it was called now. It's like dark skies or bright skies.
Sacred skies.
Sacred skies. And it was full of, you know, all sorts of strange things, like broomsticks and crystals, and had adverts in the windows advertising spiritualism and witchcraft lessons for children. And this sprung up about the same sort of time that we were praying about this, and so we started praying even harder, and it shut down, didn't it? And then another shop opened in the town about this time last year, didn't it?
Yeah.
And that was a witchcraft shop, wasn't it? That's gone now as well. And this hope of the world, I think, is something that we really need to take seriously as a church. You know, and when we see stuff like that happening, we need to stand against it. And we didn't go and stand outside this shop and shout and rant and pray and all that sort of thing. I went, that first shop, I went one day and stood on the opposite side of the road and just sort of like leant against the wall and prayed quietly. And I think these sorts of things we need to be really serious about. Kim, come and tell us about how Eastside Church is the hope of the world for the kids around Eastside.